After the Thorburns successfully began fostering several children in their home, they agreed to take in Tiahleigh. No one knew that this would be the beginning of the end. When Tiahleigh Palmer entered her home in 2015, she was only 12 years old. By all accounts, Tiahleigh, also known as Tia, was a beautiful, spirited girl who'd already faced a lot of challenges in her young life. Her biological family was unable to take care of her, and like many kids in foster care, she had been moved from home to home, longing for stability and for someone to love her. Tiahleigh's biological mother, Cindy Palmer, struggled with personal issues that made it difficult for her to provide the kind of stable, nurturing environment that a young child needs. Tiahleigh was moved between several foster homes in Queensland. She didn't have a consistent place to call home. Even with all this chaos, people who knew Tiahleigh described her as this bright, bubbly kid. She had this energetic personality and a kind of spark that you'd notice right away. Tiahleigh's knowledge of adult issues also raised concerns. At 12, she understood things about life that most children her age wouldn't need to, and she'd also experimented with drinking and whether it was from overhearing conversations or witnessing certain behaviors in the homes she lived in, or simply being a child who grew up too fast, Tiahleigh was forced to confront harsh realities far too early. But her emotional resilience was notable. Now, here's where it gets really chilling. Rick Thorburn and his family welcomed her into her home, but instead of finding love and safety, she would become a victim of the very people meant to protect her. The little girl who had been abandoned time and time again by those tasked with her care would be abandoned one final time on the desolate and lonely banks of the Pimpano River, her body so badly decomposed that she was unrecognizable. For a short time after moving in with the Thorburns, it did actually seem like Tiahleigh had found a semblance of normalcy. At first, everything was fine. Although Tiahleigh had run away a few times, she was always found a few hours later. Cindy would recall that Tia's behavior around Rick changed at a point. Around the time that she began running away, she stopped wanting to be around him or be left alone with him. But this seemed like the normal behavior for a girl as emotionally scarred as she was. Trust was really hard to come by. She'd also developed a bit of a crush on 18-year-old Trent Thorburn. And when asked if she wanted to continue staying with the Thorburns, she was adamant that yes, she wanted to. Anything to get closer to Trent. Trent was older, good-looking, and the type of man any young girl would fall for. And as this infatuation grew, Tiahleigh began dressing differently. She wore dresses with padded bras and outfits that revealed a little more of her body. Now, even though Tia was living with the Thorburns, she would still see her biological mother and grandmother on occasion, and they noticed the change in Tia's appearance. But at the time, they figured it was the start of puberty and she was just stretching her wings and becoming a woman. But the reality was that behind closed doors, a sinister secret was festering. What nobody else knew was that Trent Thorburn had actually been sexually abusing his young foster sister. The incestuous relationship came to light when Trent confessed to his cousin in a Facebook message that he had slept with Tiahleigh. He wrote, quote, "I just want the kid gone and out of my life, but I know she's also a source of income for my mom and dad as well, and I can't risk us losing money because she's gone," unquote. But Trent didn't stop there. He told his cousin that he had never had before, and that Tia, a 12-year-old girl much smaller than him, had made him do it. Even more disturbing, Trent expressed fear that she might be pregnant, writing, quote, "Also, if Tia did say something to Children's Services and she is pregnant, then it all gets investigated and I could go to jail because a court isn't going to believe me over her," unquote. On the 29th of October in 2015, after being urged by his cousin to confess, Trent tearfully told his mother that he'd had sex with Tia and that he suspected that she could be pregnant. That evening, after dance class, Tiahleigh had also complained about having stomach pains and that she had a secret that would get her kicked out of the home. Both Rick and Jolene initially thought these were silly jokes of a prepubescent girl who had been finding out about sex education at school. But after learning of Trent's actions, Jolene realized that they were in trouble. and so she told her husband about what Trent had said. It's not known exactly what was discussed that night, but for whatever reason, Jolene decided to go leave the house and go to her sister Sharon's. Perhaps she was in shock, perhaps she didn't know what to do, or perhaps she just didn't want to see what was coming next. Before Jolene left, she went to Tiahleigh's room. The girl was sitting in bed, and Jolene simply told her that she should settle down to sleep. Then, as Rick waited for her outside, Jolene left Tia. No one else was home. Jolene got into her car and drove away, leaving the 12-year-old behind with Rick. On October 30th, 2015, Tiahleigh Palmer was supposedly dropped off at Marsden State High School by Rick, but she never made it to class. For nearly a week, her whereabouts remained a mystery as police scrambled for leads. As the search for Tiahleigh intensified, Rick Thorburn played the part of the concerned foster father. But from the outset, Rick's behavior just seemed strange. It was almost like he knew that she was gone for good. And while this raised suspicions among law enforcement officials, the Thorburns weren't considered suspects. As the search continued, Rick attended a community vigil for the missing girl, shedding crocodile tears as he stood among those praying for her safe return. All the while, he knew exactly what had become of his young charge. When he was interviewed by authorities, Rick had run through the routine of the day that Tiahleigh had gone missing. The family woke up, the boys hit the gym, and everyone got ready for the day. Then, Rick dropped Tia off at school at 8:10 a.m. He claimed that he'd waited maybe 30 to 40 seconds for Tia to exit the vehicle and that he'd watch her meet up with a friend at the gate and then head inside the building. Surveillance cameras also picked up Rick's movements as he picked up spare parts before returning home, and the timeline seemed to all fit together. But the truth started to unravel on November 5th, 2015, when Tiahleigh's body was found on the banks of the Pimpama River. She'd been missing for 6 days. Her body was badly decomposed and stripped naked, leaving investigators with the difficult task of figuring out exactly what happened to her. It was noted from the autopsy that Tia, although only being 12, was not a virgin, or if she'd been engaging in consensual sex while she was still alive. After Tia was discovered, a funeral was held, and Rick was one of the pallbearers, walking alongside Tia's biological family to lay her to rest. Trent and Josh even performed a dance at the ritual. The Thorburns were a united front, and they put on one hell of a show. It would take nearly a year before the horrifying truth came to light. In the meantime, the investigation hit dead end after dead end. On December 4th, a shoe believed to be Tiahleigh's was found near where her body was discovered, but her backpack and school uniform remained missing. Initially, the investigators received a bunch of false leads from kids at Tia's school about potential sightings, but none of them led anywhere. No suspect came to light. That was until Rick's demons caught up to him. The catalyst that led to the truth being uncovered was actually another crime Rick had committed. It was discovered that he had abused 2 minors from his wife's daycare. This was what piqued the detective's interest. There was no motive. Had Tiahleigh experienced the same abuse? As months passed, whispers began to circulate about the rest of the Thorburn family. Neighbors recalled the eerie calm that had settled over the household in the days after Tiahleigh's disappearance. Some even claimed to have heard screaming coming from the property on the night she vanished, but without concrete evidence, police could only watch and wait for the family to slip up. And that slip finally came in September 2016, when investigators seized a car formerly owned by Rick Thorburn. Forensic examination of the vehicle yielded damning evidence linking the Thorburns to Tiahleigh's murder, specifically the presence of Tia's DNA in the rear of the car, which proved that she had been in it right before or after her death. So, on September 20th, police swooped in and took the entire family into custody. What happened next was like something out of a Hollywood thriller. As officers moved to arrest him, Rick Thorburn collapsed and had to be rushed to the hospital. He was placed in an induced coma, missing his scheduled court appearance the very next day. With Rick temporarily out of commission, attention then turned to the rest of the family. Police knew something was up. They just didn't realize how far this conspiracy actually extended. You might be asking yourself, How did this family get away with this for as long as they did? The answer lies in their twisted loyalty to each other. For almost a year, the Thorburns managed to deceive everyone, family, friends, and even the authorities. They continued their daily routines as if they weren't harboring a murderous secret. But the truth started to crack when the investigators zeroed in on the Thorburn family. Slowly, inconsistencies in their stories began to emerge. An anonymous call to Crime Stoppers was perhaps one of the biggest breakthroughs in the case. The tip mentioned the Facebook message that Trent had sent his cousin, and when investigators found evidence of the message, which had been deleted but then recovered, they found their trail. Now they had to stop the Thorburns from banding together. The family candidly talked about the cover-up. In one conversation, Jolene was captured telling the boys that they would have to be kept out of it. She and Rick instructed them on what to say, especially Trent. Rick's opinion was that Trent should tell the police that he was drunk and that Tiahleigh came into his room and seduced him. As investigators continued to monitor the family's conversations throughout the weeks, they noted a weak link between Josh and Jolene. The pair would have conversations about how to save themselves should things go awry. With all this hard evidence against the other family members, police brought them in for interviews. Under pressure, Trent Thorburn finally admitted to his relationship with Tiahleigh. And once that came out, everything else started falling apart. It wasn't long before Rick Thorburn was arrested for Tiahleigh's murder, and Jolene, Trent, and Joshua were all officially taken into custody for their roles in the cover-up. Jolene and Josh broke almost immediately, confessing to their roles and agreeing to become Crown witnesses for the prosecution. In their interviews, Jolene and Josh revealed damning details. According to them, Rick had said, quote, "Tia is no longer with us. I hope you all know what that means," unquote. They all knew what it meant. When Jolene was asked about whether she doubted Rick had killed the girl, she said that she had no doubt, and that Rick did what he did to protect their family and their lifestyle. Rick was interviewed by detectives again and maintained the same story, not knowing that his family had turned against him. But what Rick hadn't counted on was that detectives would double-check his story. Investigators cleverly used CCTV footage to track and time the other vehicles spotted in front of Rick on the morning that Rick claimed he dropped Tia off. They determined that although he did drive the school route, he went past it and never stopped outside to drop Tia off. It was simply a cover. He returned home after picking up the spare parts while Jolene was working in the daycare center. He attended to his car while waiting for night to fall. You see, he had hidden Tiahleigh's body in the shed after he killed her, the method of which is still a mystery. When it was dark, he removed Tia's body from her makeshift tomb and placed it in the car to drive it to the river. Although police collected 50,000 hours of CCTV footage from that evening, they never managed to catch Rick in the act of driving to dispose of the body. He left his phone at home and had taken a secluded route. It was well planned and intentional. He'd even asked Trent and Josh not to be home that evening so he could get rid of the body without having them to witness it. It was a sad and tragic ending for young Tia. Rick had just carelessly dumped her naked body on the riverbank, where trash was usually discarded. It revealed what he really thought of his foster daughter. She was nothing more than something to be thrown away. He didn't even give her the dignity of covering her body with clothing. He left her out in the open, naked with her underwear partially pulled down. Jolene admitted that the morning the body was found in the Pimpama River, she went to the bedroom where Rick lay in bed. It was all over the news. Jolene turned to Rick and asked him if the body could be Tia's, and he replied, yes, just like that. And Jolene just accepted it and then went about with her day. What is wrong with this family? The inquest into Tiahleigh Palmer's death revealed even more chilling details. During the investigation, more of Rick Thorburn's dark past began to surface. Now the public knew that he wasn't just a man who murdered his foster daughter to cover up his son's abuse. No. Rick Thorburn was a predator. He had a history of predatory behavior long before Tiahleigh ever entered his home. This wasn't a one-time act of violence. It was part of a much larger, much darker history. What's even more unsettling is the way Jolene Thorburn stuck by her husband's side despite knowing what Rick had done. She remained loyal to him until the very end, helping him to cover up the murder and pretending to grieve in public while hiding the truth behind closed doors. You would think such a brutal act would break a family apart, that guilt or fear would tear at the seams of their relationship, but no. The Thorburns carried on as if nothing had happened. They celebrated birthdays, they went to work, they lived their lives, all while knowing that they had killed a 12-year-old girl. The trials of the Thorburn family members played out over the next 2 years, each revealing new horrors about Tiahleigh's short life and brutal death. Joshua Thorburn was sentenced to 3 months in jail for lying to police and concealing information about the murder. Trent Thorburn received 4 years for his abuse of Tiahleigh and the role in the cover-up, serving just 16 months before being released. Yeah, 16 months for essentially essaying a child because he's 18 and then covering up her murder. It's heartbreaking. Jolene Thorburn was handed only 18 months for her part in the conspiracy of silence, but eventually Rick had his day in court, but he was mum about the details of what had transpired. In May 2018, nearly 3 years after Tiahleigh's murder, he finally faced justice. Standing before the court, Thorburn pleaded guilty to killing his 12-year-old foster daughter. But although he pleaded guilty, he would never reveal why and how he'd done it. Justice David Bottas did not mince words in sentencing Thorburn, calling his actions, quote, cold, calculating, and callous, unquote. He told the killer, quote, "You showed no respect for her, even in her death. You murdered this defenseless child who relied on you for protection," unquote. Thorburn was sentenced to life in prison with a non-parole period of 20 years. But even as he was led away in chains, questions lingered. What other dark deeds had the Thorburns committed over the years? How many other children had suffered abuse in their homes? The full extent of their depravity may never be known. In June 2021, a coronial inquest sought to uncover the specific cause of Tiahleigh's death. Rick Thorburn, perhaps seeking to mitigate his monstrous image, took the stand and claimed he thinks he might have accidentally suffocated her. He stood before the court, sobbed, held a crumbled piece of paper, and said, "There's been a lot of speculation about the cause of Tia's death." He read, "I was never given an opportunity in court to give an account of what happened." He continued to say, "On the night that Tia died, she and I got into an argument. She was messing about and she wouldn't go to bed. She was being stubborn and it escalated into her running away again. She packed her bag and she headed off down the driveway. I tried to talk to her around to get her to come back to the house and told her that she was being silly. I followed her down the driveway to the front gate, which was about 200 meters, and I decided I would bring her back to the house. I got my arm around her and tried to walk her back. She started struggling and I had to hold her tighter. She started screaming and swearing at me and I told her to stop because our neighbor was close to our driveway and it was very late at night. It got worse, so I put my hand over her mouth and kept going. When we got to the veranda, I let her go and she fell to the ground. I picked her up and put her on the seat and she fell to the side again. She didn't respond when I spoke to her. Her eyes were closed and I didn't think she was breathing. I must have accidentally suffocated her with my hand over her mouth and holding her so tightly around her waist. I don't remember anything that happened after this. I don't know if I tried to resuscitate her. I know that I'm responsible for Tia's death and it's something I struggle to live with. I am truly sorry," unquote. Honestly, I don't buy this story, but I'd be curious to know what you all think in the comments down below. And Coroner Jane Bentley saw right through this feeble attempt at redemption. She found Thorburn to be completely without remorse and rejected his claim of accidental death. Kate McMahon, the counsel assisting the coroner, grilled Rick on the stand. Each time Rick would deny remembering something, McMahon would circle around and attack again. Eventually, Rick grew frustrated and snapped at her, accusing her of making up stories. At the inquest, a phone call recorded between Jolene and Rick while Rick was in prison was played. In the call, Rick told Jolene that when asked questions, All he would say was that he, quote, could not recall, unquote. He added, quote, otherwise they'll get nothing. I'll go to the grave with what I've got, unquote. To this statement, Jolene simply laughed, saying that they'd have to tread water with him. She, too, showed no remorse. But McMahon wasn't done. In the inquest, she asked Rick if he molested Tiahleigh. His answer was nothing short of disgusting. He said, I don't recall. I don't think I would have either. McMahon responded, you don't remember, but you don't think that you would have? Is that your answer? And then Rick exploded. He told the council that he didn't care, that they were planting seeds in his head, and then swore profanities at them. Now, as the years have passed since the inquest, the Thorburn family has attempted to slip back into obscurity. Trent, Joshua, and Jolene have all completed their sentences and started new lives in the suburbs of Brisbane. Just 30 minutes from where Tiahleigh spent her final terrifying months. They've changed their appearances, grown out their hair, and tried to blend in with the neighbors. But can such monstrous deeds ever be truly forgotten? It's just totally unfair that they get to go live their lives after what they did to this sweet, innocent young girl. Recent reports paint a disturbing picture of the Thorburns' new life. Trent, now sporting a mullet and facial hair, was spotted loading horse riding gear into his truck with a young brunette woman. The two seemed affectionate, wiping each other's faces before driving off together. And one just has to wonder, does this woman know the true nature of the man she's with? The man who abused his 12-year-old foster sister? It's disgusting. Jolene Thorburn, meanwhile, takes daily walks with her dog and catches up with friends at her son's new home. She continues to visit her murderer of a husband in prison weekly, claiming it's out of obligation rather than love. He doesn't have anybody else, she told the inquest. He shouldn't have anybody else. She goes on to say, I'm married to him. But how can a mother stand by the man who killed a child to protect their criminal son? Not to mention, Rick himself was also suspected of abuse of children in her daycare. It shows a pattern and would be entirely plausible to suspect that he abused Tiahleigh in the same way. Remember, at one point, Tia did not want to be around him. Was it because during that time he was abusing her without anyone knowing? And since his incarceration, from the very first arrest to now, Rick has attempted to end his own life 3 times, the last time being in 2022. But thankfully, death did not take him gently into the night. The Thorburns may have served their time in the eyes of the law, but many feel justice has not truly been served. How could Rick Thorburn, who so callously snuffed out a young life, be eligible for parole in just 13 years? How could Trent, who abused a child in his care, walked free after just 16 months behind bars? The punishment hardly seems to fit the magnitude of their crimes. And perhaps most chilling of all is the realization that monsters like the Thorburns walk among us every day. They coach our children's sports teams, teach in our schools, and run daycares from their homes. How many other families harbor dark secrets behind a facade of normalcy? How many other children are suffering in silence, failed by the very systems meant to protect them? Do we even want to know? And if we did know the full scale, how would we even begin to act upon it? Above all, it's important to remember that a young girl, failed by everyone around her persistently for most of her life, was failed once again. And although her killer was caught, it can't bring her back. Rest in peace, Tiahleigh. May you find the home and the comfort you deserved. What do you think about this case? Do you think that Rick Thorburn will ever admit to the full truth about what happened that October evening? Was justice fully served in the case of Trent, Josh, and Jolene? And should they still be able to live their lives in peace just 30 minutes from where Tiahleigh was murdered by one of their own? Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for hearing Tiahleigh's story. And if you'd like to check out more true crime deep dives, hit that subscribe button and leave your comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, bye.